Hello and welcome. Ukrainian forces take out a training camp in Kherson. Fighting is continuing along the front line, and we'll have more information about the attacks on Moscow as well as the international support for either side. We'll start off with some correction. This was spread around in Russian Telegram channels on Twitter, as well as supposedly a barrier over the Strait of Kerch that is being constructed, but it's now geolocalized that it's actually from the harbor of Sevastopol. So whether or not the Russians are building barriers over the Strait of Kerch is unknown as of now. Also, the drone attack on Moscow again, where the Russians claimed that the third drone was taken over with electronic warfare means and disabled, and then crashed into a building. Apparently, it crashed into a building where another drone hit before, in which are offices of several Russian ministries. So at least it's an interesting way to disable drones by doing this. So yeah, this is the information I've got now. Yesterday in the reporting, I hadn't found that connection yet. So in this regard, the IQ quarters actually has apparently several ministries of it in that have offices in it. There's been an attack on the harbor of Ismail, as we can see here. Again, Shahid drones were used to strike a Ukrainian harbor on the Danube River. Ismail is on the border with Romania, so it's very close to NATO territory, as we can see here. The interesting part is it was hit after cargo ships had basically broken, as it was called, broken the blockade that Russia kind of announced towards Ukraine by crossing in there and crossing into the Danube River. We have an image here of the ships that are currently on the Danube around Ismail. As you can see, it's a lot of them. And the interesting part is, though, that the whole thing is a fairly limited breakthrough. This here is the border of Romania, and this is the Danube. So all the sea border should be roughly here. So all the two sides need to do is basically any ship in quotation mark breaking the blockade has to go roughly 10 kilometers through Ukrainian territory to then be on the Danube at the point where it is the border between Romania and Ukraine, where by any reasonable means the ship should be safe from Russian attacks. So I guess that was absolutely within reasonable means to enter into Ukrainian territorial water with a civilian ship without being attacked. And it made sense. If Ismail is a big export harbor, to go there, the Russians wouldn't dare attacking ships on the Danube, because they might easily attack a ship on the Romanian side in NATO territory, and loading on Ismail and then withdrawing here would easily be possible. Maybe, depending on the ship size, that canal here might also be an option to cross out. So nevertheless, while it was technically probably blockade running, in overall perspective, it's close to impossible for the Russians to intercept that, unless they have a ship right there, which the Ukrainians would sink, or unless they have planes overhead that would strike a ship as soon as it enters there. And as long as it's a civilian ship, that seems highly unlikely as well. When we go to the developments along the front line, we have news from the northern part of the front line. Here, there are additional Russian attacks reported close to Kupiansk. The Russians are claiming several positions taken over. I do not see proof, so maybe they have, maybe they haven't. Not much there. We have a report about an attack on Berestove. Whatever reason, it needs to reload here. Here Vargonzo is writing that the Russian armed forces attacked in the Berestove to bypass Ukraine's fortification in Novoselivsk. This is interesting insofar, not for the fact that there was an attack here, but because the Russians claimed that Novoselivsk was captured recently, and Vargonzo is now writing that the Ukrainian fortifications inside of Novoselivsk, that proves to us that Novoselivsk is at the very least still having Ukrainian positions, depending on how big the control for them is here. The Russians claim they have been successful at Chervonopopivka. I cannot see any proof of this. Fighting is also going on is also continuing at the bridgehead between Raihorodka and Novovodiane, here over the Sherebets River, but I do not see any change in territory, so the Russian offensive seems to be halted and stalled there. Also, fighting is continuing in the Serebryansk forest, the same here, no confirmed change in territory, and this is basically the theme. We have fighting around Klishivka being reported, no change in territory. We have fighting around Avdiivka. Klishivka also Russian counterattacks were reported, no change in territory. Around Avdiivka, Ukrainian attacks on Siverne and in Marinka, no change in territory. Russians attack in Avdiivka, Marinka, and Pobieda, no change in territory confirmed here. We have reports of fighting at Staromayorsk, artillery fire, no change in territory. At Orikhiv, the Russians are reporting the defeat of a smaller Ukrainian attack. They are also saying they did a counterattack at Robotine, no change in territory here as well. That can be confirmed. We have an interesting message here from the Telegram channel of the Storm Ossetia Volunteer Battalion. They say that they had troop rotation. Now, we talked about it in the past that the Russian side is lacking the reserves for troop rotation. At least in this regard, there seems to have been some reserves for them to rotate through. Further west in Vasilivka, here in the Vasilivka area, again, small fighting being reported, more or less skirmishes, no change in territory. The same over the Dnipro River. So basically, the whole front line is not moving at all. I read with Riba, they are actually writing that the front line is dormant as of now. There are still attacks happening. That seems to be purely reconnaissance attacks by the Ukrainians, small infantry groups going on, but no big advances whatsoever that I can confirm from my side. Generally, we have an interesting view when we take the what military bloggers are saying, because here Veteran Records is actually writing that that the attacks on the Ukrainians in the northern part of the front line are meant to fix Ukrainian troops in Kherson. This is basically confirming what I talked about in the past, that the Russian offensive here, the Russian attacks here, in my mind, only make a sense in that they are bound to fix Ukrainian troops and draw additional reinforcements in. It seems like they have been successful in both to a certain degree, but that was the goal, not to reach the Oskil or anything like this. That seemed to be extremely unlikely in this regard, and they seem to have been successful here in their mission to fix Ukrainian reinforcements and Ukrainian troops. The British Ministry of Defense is saying that the 58th Army is likely suffering of attrition and exhaustion because of the lack of rotation. That was the one where Major General Popov was the commander before. That has been, he has been sacked because he criticized the lack of rotation. And they're also saying that it's most likely that the Russians are suffering shortage of ammunition, the lack of reserves, and problems securing the flanks of units in the defense. Lack of ammunition there is obviously also because of the supply lines and depots that are being struck. That doesn't mean the Russians don't have artillery shells anymore. It just means that they have serious issues getting them to the front in necessary amounts. Belarusian helicopters have entered into Poland. First, it seemed like the Polish government tried to play it down, but when videos appeared, they turned it into something bigger, but it seems like it has been without consequences. Whether that was an aimed provocation or an honest mistake, I cannot say as of now. And we excuse me, we have a video here of a Ukrainian attack on the training base in Charil Hach, as we can see here, a reconnaissance drone, and you see the amazing distances it can work, sees Russian troops in formation there. This is supposedly a rest and recreation area that is also being used, and the Ukrainians, usually that island is uninhabited. It's over 5,000 hectares big, so I think it's the biggest island inside of Crimea, according to what I read. You can see it here, and it's usually uninhabited, and the Russians apparently used it for rest and recreation. until HIMARS showed up and turned that rest and recreation into something less pleasantly. We will see it in a second. We see the troops here. And the strikes continue. This was done on the island down here. This should be this island here, if I'm not completely mistaken. Other than that, we have information from the Crimea, which is somewhat interesting. And that is that supposedly that strike on the Chonhar Bridge that I've reported was aimed exactly where it's supposed to be. Now, I have no idea about this topic. I'm not a structural engineer. I have no clue about this. We have another one claiming this guy is fairly well known. I think I have something in the back of my head where he made mistakes, but I don't want to expose myself here claiming that whatever. I just have to say I can't judge the competence of those comments about this. I have no clue. So I'm not going to tell you this is wrong or this is right. They are basically claiming, from what I understand, that the strike here on this fundamentally weakened the bridge, the foundations or something. And this means that apparently that's what at least what I understand from him, is that this would mean that the Russians can't bring railroad cranes to repair it because the bridge is too weak to even bring it close enough to the damaged part. Now, I don't really understand why that would be a reason. Shouldn't wheeled cranes be strong enough to do the same thing? Obviously, this is the only train connection between Crimea and the land bridge. As this here from Mariupol, there is no working connection to the east. So a railroad crane that isn't up here. If it actually can't cross over it, it's pointless. They can't reach it. That might be true, but whether that's actually what's needed, whether wheeled cranes are impossible to use, I have no way of judging it. So I'll just report to you what those two accounts say. And unfortunately, I'm not capable of saying whether they are just telling pure fantasy or whether it's actually the full truth. Maybe you know better and leave a comment in the comment sections to judge whether or not these claims are justified. According to Riba, there was also freshly an air attack, a rocket strike. We see it here in the background, a smoke plume on a Crimean airport. Supposedly it didn't hit anything, and they are wondering what it was, either an S-200 or maybe a Chom-2 missile. Either of it would be possible. When it comes to international troop generation, we have reports that Iran is likely not only going to build a drone factory in Tatarstan in Russia, but also in Gomel in Belarus. This would mean that the production of Shahid drones would increase visibly and significantly, and that Belarus would obviously hand over at least part of those drones to the Russians seems likely, so Ukraine can expect a lot more Shahids in the future. When it comes to the political sphere, we have news that Wagner is now training with Belarusian armed forces. They are teaching them infantry tactics as well as how to handle small drones. Obviously, this is one of the big changes in this war, that the omnipresence of small drones everywhere along the front line, and a lot of militaries have not adjusted to that yet. Wagner has extensive experiences with this, so supposedly they are teaching the Belarusians as of now. We have a report here from Russia itself, and Maria Lvova-Belova, who is looked for. There's an arrest warrant for her by the International Court of Justice. And according to her, Russia has taken about 4.8 million residents of Ukraine in the Donbass, including 700,000 children, into Russia. Now, this is more than 10% of the pre-war population of Ukraine that were moved to Russia. There is no proof whatsoever from my side to which extent these movement of people was under coercion, under force. If it was, it would be a clear violation. It would be deportation, which is a clear violation of Article 49 of the Forced Geneva Convention. It would be a war crime. But to what extent people were told to move, to what extent people wanted to leave the war zone, Independently verifying it will be somewhat difficult in this regard. The Ukrainian side obviously claims that it's mass deportation, that the children are being taken away from their parents. And she, again, as we see, she is admitting some children left without parental care were placed into foster families. Like the Russians are claiming that they are not being adopted to Russian parents. They are claiming honest motives. How you want to judge it, I leave it up to yourself. We have a message here from the head of the Presidential Bureau in Ukraine, according to which Ukraine is negotiating security guarantees with the US. How that is supposed to work, well, let's be optimistic and see how it's going to turn out in the future. I'm doubtful because I don't see that the US would commit themselves to anything legally binding where a change in government wouldn't be able to stop it. And I don't see the US committing themselves to military aid, like with their own forces, in case anything changes either. That I don't see this happening. So let's see where this turns to. We have a news here from Russian opposition media, according to which the amount of smuggled goods are identified that have been brought into Russia. And according to them, since the beginning of 2023, $502 million worth of sanctioned dual-use computer chips, $171 million worth of airplane components that are also under sanctions, and $5 million worth in precision machining tools have been brought into Russia through the use of third-party countries. We have Riba here claiming that the Americans are taking pictures of the Crimea to allow for Russian attacks. Riba is doing that quite a lot, and they are even claiming the amount of pictures that have been taken, and they claim where those pictures were taken. I honestly have no idea how that's supposed to work, how you're supposed to identify where satellite pictures are being taken from a satellite circling over you, especially with the specific location. Maybe somebody can enlighten me in the comment sections, but I doubt that this is actually possible. Like, how would you see it? Where the lens is pointing? I have no idea. But at least Riba is claiming that, and claiming that they are doing this to aid. And we have a video here of a new Ukrainian maritime drone. The Ukrainian armed forces are continuing developing them, and this is one of them that is being used here. Also, a report of international aid. Ukraine has received 2 new Susanna 2 self-propelled howitzers from Slovakia. They are being paid for, I think, by Norway, Germany, and Denmark. For Slovakia to build them and to give them to Ukraine. The total contract should be for 16, if I'm not wrong here, and the first 2 of them have been handed over. And we've had pictures of the CV90 that was captured. In the past, I showed it to you, and we have pictures here of it being moved away. And in the end, we have a video of the CV90 now being transported away. So the Russians have now definitely captured a CV90 and an AMX-10 RC that was given to Ukraine from Western means. That was it already from me for now. If you enjoyed the situation report, even though the front line wasn't too active, if it was informative to you, please hit the thumbs up button. Leave a comment for the algorithm, what you think about the ongoing offensive, where you expect further advances, or whether you know more about this thing here on the bridge. Leave a comment that can enlighten us all, and it's really helping with the algorithm. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting me here. And that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.